Hi, everyone. Thank you. I know there's a lot more people who registered who are going to hop in, but thank you, Christine and Michael and Michelle and Reem and Stephanie and Tiffany and Tracy. My name is Mike Rombola. I am the founding head of school of SCORE Academy, Miami. Before we start, I want to give a big shout out to our marketing team in South Africa, Janine and Lee, and Lee, because they are on with us right now, all the way from South Africa. It's midnight over there. So thanks for hanging in with us. We have a fun webinar for you all. We're going to tell you a little bit about SCORE and how the topic, which is how the environment shapes learning with our children, dovetails into what we do here at SCORE. And I'm going to have Rose kick things off for us. Let me tell you a little bit about Rose. Rose is a teaching fellow at Harvard. She went to Oxford University. She is an executive who works in ed tech and is internationally known, currently does some work at the State of New York University in New Paltz, and we're really excited to have her here with us. She's worked at Newsella. She's on the board for a couple other places. She's just fantastic all around, and I'm sure that if I ever got into Harvard in the next life, that I would enjoy being in her class, I'm sure, if I showed up to class. So that is our expert. You've just met our expert. And then Rose, I'm going to hand it over to you, and then we can kind of get started with some things.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. And thanks to the team at SCORE for inviting me. I'm really glad to be here and happy to talk about a topic very close to my own heart, which is the role that environment plays in learning. We know so much more now about young people's brains and the incredible development that happens, but it isn't just always what's happening inside a student's mind, but what we do to optimize that in the space and place that they can learn. So the analogy I like to have here is, of course, when a plant isn't growing well, we don't interrogate the seed. We don't get mad at the plant. We check what around it could be made more healthy, more conducive to growth and to flourishing and to thriving. So we check the soil, the light, the water, and aspects of learning work the same way. We can ask the question, which is parents, and I'm a parent of a teenager, what does my child or what does each individual learner need to thrive? And that we're going to talk about the different systems today that will impact that. Some of those are changes that we can make easily. Some of them are a little bit more of a battle, and some of them can rely on what we do as parents and adults to optimize the learning. And it's about optimizing one or two levers at a time to see if we can make a difference. So I've divided the environments that I think shape learning and which we know from a lot of research have real impact on what makes learning successful. Obviously, let's begin with the emotional aspects of students. And for those of you that have teenagers, some of those are big and maybe seem the biggest and most important of the six environments you see here. But really, safety is at the heart of what is most important for a student to be willing to try, to be open to learning, even listening, to be willing to attempt things. A child who does not feel safe will not learn. And obviously there are challenges that many kiddos have when they come to school that are things that we can't control as educators, or things that kids in their makeup that might need greater support, but we can certainly set them up for success. Secondly, and these two are often talked about together in school, the social aspects. And, we talk about social emotional, but these are different. They impact one another. Of course, all six of these connect. But this idea of being able to belong, to have friends, we know it's true as adults at work. One of the greatest insights that we have about employees being successful and happy at work is whether they have a friend at work. And of course, that's also true at school. So does your child feel it's worth showing up to school? Not because of the learning or the teachers, but because they feel they belong in that classroom, that they belong in that learning environment, that they belong in the content of that subject. We certainly know that there's a lot of evidence about young girls and women's attitudes towards math and science, and those can already cut them out in terms of their self-efficacy to be successful in a STEM classroom of some sort. So that social belonging is both a learning and a personal experience in terms of a group of kids. Language. So as somebody who's worked in literacy for most of my career and does research in this area, this is incredibly important. The words, the conversation, the ideas that a child is regularly exposed to, and a teenager particularly, as at home as much as at school, is really the raw material that they need, and the vocabulary they need to build for greater comprehension, and the neural pathways that will continue to open up ideas and concepts for them. So it's a good thing to think about. What does language and discourse look like in your own home, as well as wondering what that might be like and whether we can observe that in schools. Physical environment, pretty straightforward here, but sometimes we forget about these because we think, let teens be teens. But sleep, so important. When I was at school, we thought, sleep was for losers, and now we know that I was very wrong. And sleep really is one of the basic needs for learning. Nutrition, some basic exercise, and all of those basic needs, of course, come first. And as parents, you know that. Practice. Practice environments. It's not just an activity, it's also an environment, and that should happen in terms of every class, which is that there's space and place and time for being able to practice something. And I'll talk a little bit about retention and retrieval in a minute. But being able to make sure that there's instructional practice, that kids get feedback, and that is positive feedback, but it's also how they can do better. And that's different from just how much time they spend on it. So the quality of the practice really matters. And then expectations. And we all, as adults working with kids, have control over this. What you get, what you expect is the line here. And what is expected is going to calibrate and often define a child's effort. The more we expect, and the way that we put those expectations forward can help drive or threaten a child's self-efficacy in a particular subject or around learning and school in general. Remember that kids often expect more of themselves than we realize, and teenagers are particularly tough on themselves without us knowing. So as I said, none of these operate independently. You've got to feel safe, and then you can use your language, and then you can try a practice problem. We want kids to be able to take risks in an intellectual role. So I mentioned attention, and I think we all know as adults that we have our own kinds of distractions. I have an important little metaphor here. It's different from the outside nature metaphor, which is about our working memory. So there's only so much information we can fit in our working memory. Famously, there's a 5+2 rule, which basically allows us to remember phone numbers. Not that we need to do that anymore, but there's not much we can keep in our working memory without either discarding it or moving it to long-term memory. And so the filing cabinet represents long-term memory. So this speaks to both reducing distraction and protecting focus so that we can protect learning. And it means reducing distractions so that that focus can be protected. So one of the big discussions out in schools, as many of you know, is the removal of phones from classrooms, but also the reduction of devices in classrooms. And so, if work can be done in print, particularly math problems for young children, being able to handwrite, these are incredibly valuable, and they're not just an alternative format. There's real research around better comprehension, better understanding, and better building of long-term retention. So the more that we can move from multitasking, notifications off the desk, so that you can move from the desk to the filing cabinet, and kids can build their learning memory and working memory better. So protect your own attention and protect your kids' attention. So part of the reason that we want to make sure that we're protecting attention is this idea that we think often as parents that the best kind of studying is more. And if you just review and read over your notes, often teachers will say that, make sure you read your study guide, or highlight or reread a chapter or your textbook. Really, the evidence really shows clearly that learning happens somewhere in the retrieval process. So we want kids to be able to learn, read something, answer questions around it, and then try and remember that, get feedback on it, and then repeat that over time. And sometimes we find in curricula in schools that there's not a lot of retrieval going. You finish a unit on circles, and then suddenly you've moved on to rectangles, and there was no review of how circles and rectangles connect. And so these are one of the challenges that that kids often have when they're trying to remember, other than just cramming, and trying to make connections between topics or connections between subject and subject. We don't make it easy for them. One of the things we like to say is this is why flashcards beat rereading, and it's why flashcards beat a lot of things. And by flashcards, I mean index cards. So if your kids are planning their back to school shopping, I recommend all of the colored index cards at Staples over Quizlet or any of the EdTech tools out there. Even as someone who's worked in EdTech, I feel like being able to connect with the flashcards, practice that way, and it's a great way as a parent to also, support your kiddo as they're practicing. So just going straight from reading to rereading is not going to allow for that spaced practice. So don't let kids forget the retrieval step. Anytime you can keep asking them those questions or checking in on the flashcards is a good time. So the next and last piece I wanted to share with you is something you can check into at home, which is, we call it the home learning audit. And these are just simple questions. There's no right or wrong here, but it's really an opportunity for you to talk at home or with your kiddo around what makes a great environment at home for kids learning? And it's something obviously that SCORE really thinks about in both their teachers, their tutors, and the physical space they have. Is our home rich in conversation, or are we all sitting on our phones or in our tiny little Netflix personal spaces? Do we protect focused attention? I know some families, we try and do this, have no phones and no devices at meal times. That's a great way to protect focused attention. Do we try and make sure that there's no TV on in the background when kids are doing homework, or minimize external noise? Back to literacy and the importance of reading. We forget that telling kids to read is not the same as modeling reading ourselves. Do your kids see you actively and visibly reading? It's an important thing, and perhaps reading paper as well, not just reading and reading a book. That makes a real difference in terms of making that what it means to learn. It's a key part for those of us that remember college. There is still book reading that goes on in college. Are mistakes treated as part of learning? I think we see a lot in math classrooms, particularly, that getting things right is the answer. But in fact, the learning happens at the friction point where a mistake takes place. And it's hard to explain that to adolescents who really have social issues around the whole fear of making errors and being embarrassed. But that is the learning. I mentioned retrieval and the importance of practice rather than just rereading. And then, do our routines or our behaviors as a family communicate not just that school matters, but or getting good grades, but that learning itself matters, and that's the point. So we challenge everyone today to choose one of those things that you might think, we could probably do better, that you might change this quarter as everyone goes back to school. Small sustainable changes that you keep reminding yourself and other members of your family about. They can compound over time and take it in, even if they don't seem like they do. So I thought about this a lot, this together, and I'm making my changes as well here at home. And I think back to you. Oh, actually, before that, you'll see that there is actually a downloadable. Mike will share that at the end. There's a downloadable home learning audit. And again, the question is not, are you doing it right? Are you not doing it right? It's really the opportunity to focus plan, or if you're a child or young people, around what learning can look and feel like beyond just opening the books or opening the Chromebook.
I will say something as I make the connections to the wonderful job that Rose did at facilitating that and talking to us about how the environment helps shape and impact how we learn. You'll notice that at the bottom of the Zoom, you should see like a little box with a question mark that says Q&A. So what that is somewhere where you can place some questions based on what you're hearing, and based on the connections that you're making to your experience at school, your child's experience at school, and at home. So what I'd like to do is kind of parlay some of the things that we heard Rose speak on and then make that connection and align it to who we are at Score Academy. So there's a couple things that really stood out to me listening to Rose speak, and one of which is the idea of expectations. And I know I had the opportunity to coach teachers in Philadelphia and in New York City. And one of the buzzwords in education is the idea of rigor. And we always broke that down as there's three elements to that: expectation, demonstration, and support. So if you think about it, nobody rises to low expectations. Rose spoke about taking risks in and outside of the classroom. She also spoke about reinforcing things at home. So that expectation, demonstration, and support that helps shape our environment, that is rigor. You it's a little tricky for me not to see everybody's face in the screen because I usually like to look at people's faces to see if any of my jokes land. So you can shoot me a text at some point later and just let me know which ones did and which ones didn't with you. So you look on there and it says emotional and social. So I think that if one were to potentially notice the title in an email or when we kind of advertised this webinar and think about how the environment shapes learning, it's not just our physical space, and we'll get to that, but it's really all encompassing in terms of the energy, the spirit, what you're doing, the intention of it, how it's reinforced, and the space. So we are a micro school. We are a boutique by design. We are not built to challenge or rival any large private school that might be a quote unquote traditional setting. Like, we're untraditional by default, but there are some common threads to what we do. But we cap out at 100 students. So what does that look like? And then what does that mean in terms of your child's experience here at the school? Well, obviously, if you have 100 students in the classroom, your classes are going to be a smaller size. When I taught in Philly, I think the most I had was like 32 kids at one point, right? And we had fun with it. And I'd like to think that we got a lot done. But imagine teaching not 30 kids, but 6 kids. So I'm a sports guy. And if you were to use the metaphor of like baseball, imagine if Bryce Harper, for those of you who don't know, plays for the Phillies. Imagine if he got up to bat 30 times versus getting up to bat 5 times in a game. Think about the amount of opportunities that he has to get on base, to get a hit, to get a home run. All of those things you can kind of equate and consider the parallels to in a classroom. If I'm in a room with like 3, 4, 5, 6 other kids, I still get to socialize. I still get to respond to my peers. I still get to collaborate. I also have so many opportunities and at bats in the classroom. So that environment, that emotional and social, is a big part to what we do. You'll notice something on there about my cell phone. I'm trying to see is my mom in this or not, because she always told me not to do that, but I always give my cell phone to everyone. I still have the number of every mom, dad, aunt, uncle, of anyone I ever taught or had opportunities to work with their families. I take it as a privilege. And I think that that is something where that accessibility of myself being available 24/7 is something that I enjoy. And I think it speaks to the environment here. So if you are a stakeholder of the school, feel free to reach out unless the Eagles are playing or if I'm out to lunch with my mother. So let's talk about the physical and social. When you cap out at 100 kids and your average is 6 kids, the child is known, not just accounted for. Right now, what does that mean to be known? It's not just everybody knows your name, we have an opportunity and the privilege to get to know what's happening in your life, how you're feeling that day, what we can do based on your interests and aptitudes to tailor things that's the right fit for you. We get to understand, the cadence and tone of your voice, and just really get to know you and your families. So if you think about the idea of taking risks, that I believe I'm paraphrasing, but something that Rose mentioned, if you're known at school and you can feel that unconditional love in a safe space, then imagine what that can do in terms of begetting opportunities for you to demonstrate more courage, right? So, 6 kids, more bats in the classroom, opportunities to be seen, known, heard, and we just meet you where you're at. So, in school, one of the things we say is we meet kids where they're at. That's not just academics, that's a holistic mindset. And then if you think about expectations and flexibility, right? I know more than ever in schools, families are attempting to solicit school services that are a little bit more flexible and not as traditional as maybe what all of us experienced or many of us experienced as a kid. You're seeing more families look into like homeschools and learning labs and micro schools. Our schedules might change and be a little bit different. We might have travel. If you think about where we're located in Miami and just it being a transit community, the diversity here, and the fact that, we have a lot of young athletes that come here. We have kids who are coming here from New York City and all around the world, and a lot of them need flexible scheduling, and we can provide that. Whether that means, hey, I start my classes a little bit later, I start them a little bit earlier, maybe all of my classes except one is a group and I'm one-on-one for a class. That opportunity to be flexible and to adapt kind of is a common thread with the physical and social and emotional piece. And therefore, my friends, when you have a 95% retention rate, that is a good way to gauge your success. I mean, how satisfied are your families? How do your kids feel coming to the school? Are they excited to come back? So we are in Coconut Grove in Miami. I'm really excited about the space that we have. Many of us have had an opportunity to be here. Rose has checked this out. It's state of the art. It's sleek. There are little learning nooks and things along those lines. It's 3 floors. It's a safe space. It's modern, but also like the general location of where we are. You can see to the picture far to the left, we are basically like 100 yards from Grove Station and the Metro line, meaning that if I'm coming from like Kendall or Dadeland, or if I'm coming from Brickell, or up even from Miami Beach, I have a straight shot over to Score Academy, and the underline is right behind us, which is a really cool outside space with bike lanes and running and walking lanes. So to have our community be a part of this community, it's too many ways to win to lose. And as you can see, that's the front of our building. There's some nice palm trees. And if you look really closely, I think that's right after we cut the ribbon. But that is the front entrance to our building. If you have not had a chance to check us out, just reach out. We have tours all the time. I think we actually have an open house tomorrow night. And one of my favorite spaces in the school, that is on the first floor over to the right. Many families and some students have said, like, oh, I feel like I'm an Apple, or I feel like this is a WeWork. We take that as a compliment and endearing sentiment. And I think that space is kind of the exemplar of the energy and the vibe here for kids to be known, have that flexibility, and then balance that physical environment piece and how it's conducive to the social, emotional environment here at school. But that's us. So we have a live Q&A. There are some questions here. I'm very pleased and flattered with the attendance. There are a lot of people here. I don't know if you can see the participants. We have a lot of people here. Rose, why don't you and I go through this one? Rose, I'm going to let you take this one. This is from my old grade partner back in Philadelphia. And he asked a good question here, and I think he's trying to challenge me. So I'm going to pass this on to you. What do you think, Rose? Can you see it?
Yeah, I can. Thanks. Yeah, such a such a good question. And how long have we got to talk about some of the gaps in research? I'm going to give you, of course, the ones that I'm particularly interested in. I think there's many kinds of gaps. I think there's also a lot of scientific gaps. There's a lot of educational research that doesn't always follow the scientific method. So I think that's one aspect. But I think that there's a pretty significant gap in the role of technology and technology tools in impacting and affecting learning, both on the positive and the less positive side. So obviously, I talked a lot about attention. But I think it's been pretty challenging with all of the innovation, which has sort of outpaced the science in terms of working out which edtech tools are truly valuable and for whom and under what conditions. So I think specificity there, there's real value in accommodations and support. Very good evidence around using word processing to write, particularly for writers that struggle. At the same time, what are we going to lose cognitively if we let kids write with AI all the time? So I think the role of technology is a huge, huge gap area where we just really don't know that much. I personally think that there isn't enough data or information about the relationship between poor reading and poor performance in mathematics, because as math gets harder, more problems are complicated, involve multiple steps. And of course, word problems and problem solving are pretty central to most K-12 standards. And if kids can't read the problem or comprehend the problem or be able to even pass the vocabulary in the problem, students for whom English is not their first language, for example, students who literally can't decode the words in the math problem, then we are not grading the right things. We're working out that a kid failed math, but in fact, what they're doing is not being able to read. So I think there's a bit of a gap there. There's some good work done, but not at older levels with older kids. And then one area that, about 10 years ago, there's some really interesting work done around teacher evaluation, which looked at the fact that that students actually had a better sense of the success of a teacher than principals. This was a Gates-funded study for a bit. And I really think for those of you that I taught middle and high school, I think Mike didn't mention that. I mean, teenagers really know what's up. And I think students can be an incredibly good barometer if we gave them the right tools in place, and didn't over-index on it to be able to provide feedback to teachers. And I would love to see the impact of that kind of research on both teacher performance, teacher success, and being able to understand the role of kids' attitudes towards the teachers in terms of their learning outcomes. So there's some of the gaps that I see. There's plenty more, and happy to talk about it all day long, but there might be more questions. You're on mute, mate.
I'm sure everybody was clapping when they found out I was on mute. The fact that Rose has experience as a teacher, I know for me that helps with my buying and investment as someone looking into and taking heed to research. It's always know that someone out there doing that research and bringing some information back to us has had experience in the classroom and knows what it's like to get into the weeds of everything. We have another question from Tiffany, and this is a good one. She actually just texted me and said, "I asked you a hard question. Good luck." She said, I'm interested in some of community you're able to create among the student peer group. Could you speak more to some of the ways that you do this through events, trips, milestones, celebrations, etc.? So that's a great question, Tiffany. Thank you. It's very important to us. I feel confident that we've demonstrated it so far, even in the temporary, small, quaint, cozy space that was about a mile away from here. Imagine now in this new space with more students and some more experience, and in this location, what we can do. And I'll speak to some of those things. Everyone talks about field trips and things like that. We like to consider them mobile classrooms, opportunities for community service. They're so important to us and such a priority that if one were to look at our school calendar, you will notice specifically on there, it mentions, okay, on this day in September, we are doing a community service, mobile classroom outside somewhere. When you do those types of things, you build, you build a cohort, you build solidarity, awareness of what's going on, something bigger than yourself. And I think that sometimes there is a misnomer that in a boutique micro school that the opportunities for us to interact are maybe not available, and it's not the case. If you think about different events that we've had, we do something in the first semester and last semester where all of our students and staff have to do research projects on other cultures. We do different projects and trips for Women's History, Black History, Hispanic History Month. We do awards after every month. If you haven't noticed, I am a little bit of an out of the box guy who has, through smoke and mirrors, had opportunities to be where I'm at now. And a lot of that is based on the energy that I think we bring. And if we talk about the environment in which kids thrive, a lot of that is celebrating them, celebrating their peers, promoting opportunities for like interdependent, collaborative spaces. So we do all of those things. We're not here just to tread water. We have a lot of fun ideas, and we have an opportunity as a new school to throw a lot of ideas at the wall and see what sticks. People that I talk to in the community who are looking to engage with us, I let them know if you have an idea of anything that you ever want to do with a school, we are the place to propose that to, because we're looking to be innovative and creative. And the fact that we have all of our kids back from last year, I think speaks to that. So we have, and I was trying to answer, that was long-winded. I apologize. Tracy asked a question, and I'm going to pass this over to Rose. She asked, my child does homework at the kitchen table with the TV on in the background. Is that actually a problem?
Well, it depends. I think I think it's good to. It depends what kind of homework it is. It depends how much they can block out the noise. It is great to, as I said, preserve focus and minimize distraction. There are many people for whom, I spent 20 years in New York City, and, the kitchen table was the only table in in certainly our first apartment, where if we'd had our kid then, it was the only place that she would have been able to do her homework. So if that's what's there, then you need to minimize the distractions without that. You can turn the TV down if the child can be with their back to the TV, then that can really help minimize it. So if it can be off, that's great, but sometimes there might need to be reasons why that can't be. So you want to preserve that space for working memory and for focus. So that would be my recommendation. I can't work with the TV on, but I'm old. Kids will tell you that they can multitask, they can listen to music, they can watch TV, they can be on social media, and they can do their homework. And I'm just afraid that the whole kids are wired differently thing, that's not actually true. They think it is because, they're teenagers. I did want to add just to that question um, about community, just having visited the center and seeing, the real difference, as you say, about working with, several kids or under six, and sometimes one or two, that a lot of the community comes from the relationship between students and adults too. And I think sometimes we think about the social dynamic of learning as being, well, kids working together and then the teacher's sort of the facilitator, which is fine. But actually, many students will talk about the fact that their relationship with their teacher, to my point about research that's not been done very much, that their relationship with the teacher is key. And so a lot of the sort of social aspect that I've seen is about those relationships. And those aren't just about the learning. You had a basketball hoop, and, tutors are using the basketball hoop and playing that up with some of the questions that are going on, and that's happening with kids. And so some of that social community feeling is really between the adults and kids. And I think that's something that larger schools really struggle with, where teachers have to be teachers and kids are kids. And because you're working with so many kids at once, as we both know, you have to stick to, like, things have to be done exactly in this way. And there's a little bit more fluidity, which your space has, that I saw when I visited.
No, yeah, I appreciate that, and I've received some similar sentiment from families. Obviously, when we answer these questions, you want to put our best foot forward in terms of how we respond. But I will just tell you, I'm just a vessel to what we're doing here. But if you look at myself and my role, I was not brought on here because I'm the most organized. I was not brought on here because I'm the most serious. I happen to be a pretty outgoing guy who takes having fun very seriously. I don't think that learning and enjoying ourselves are mutually exclusive. So it's something that is actually very important to me in the school space. So I'd like to think that myself and the teachers, as well as parents, families, and the kids, try to embody that in what we do. Oh, there's one more here. This one
Yeah.
says, my son keeps his phone face down next to him while he does homework. He's not touching it. Does that still matter? Oh, this is a good question. So this builds off of the other one, Rose. This is saying that they're not on the phone, but it's right next to him and it's face down. And he's
Oh, I love this question so much. So, uh, the research on this is pretty interesting. I haven't read any research on it with young people, but I can tell you with adults that unless a phone is 6 feet away, I know that feels a bit COVID-y to use 6 feet again, but unless a phone is 6 feet away, we are part of our attention is still on the phone. I know that seems unbelievable. It can be in our pockets, but some part of our brain is still aware of it. And it's why many psychologists and other people suggest not having the phone in your bedroom or certainly next to your bed. Uh, it is still a distraction. I know I sound like some kind of phone fascist, but it is. I mean, good on you that your son actually does have it face down, and that is an achievement, and we should all celebrate that because most kids do not. And of course, they're able to text on the computer device, of course. So it doesn't really matter if texting is the thing or be on social. So it depends really what they're doing on the other screen that will be relevant. But yeah, we are constantly distracted unless we physically put our phone away. That's why Yonder pouches and there's many boxes you can now get. Our family's about to invest in a box where on Sundays, we're going to put all of our phones in there and lock it for a couple of hours because the ability that our brains have to just constantly kind of literally physically try and reach for it. If you don't believe me, check your pickups at the end of a day or at the end of a week, and you will be shocked at how often you are picking up your phone, and that's because your brain is already distracted. So, um, your son's doing great, but try and make sure it can be further away. He will have more a percentage of his focus on the work.
I can speak from experience too that once I start looking at my phone, whether it be at work, particularly at night as well, trying to get things done, that algorithm really fish hooks me. So we appreciate everyone coming here tonight. A big shout out and a full minute toast to Rose for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know she's in New York now. She's been in Miami recently, and we've had a chance to get to know each other, and it's been really awesome to hear you speak tonight, to hear you respond to these questions, and to elaborate on the idea of the environment and how it impacts learning. So on here it says the question isn't what is wrong with your child, it's what does my child need to thrive. Everything that we spoke about, expectations, accessibility, at home, at school, I think if you take pieces of all of this, that is the ingredients to impacting their learning in a positive way. So if you are curious, right, about the fit for your child, maybe here at Score Academy in Miami, or if you just want to check us out or share with a friend, please do so. There is a QR code over to your left. And the recording of this is going to be sent within 48 hours. You can share with anyone who couldn't join, and you can let them know that it is a riveting experience from 6 o'clock to about 6:45, and it changed your life, and that you're going to share it with them in hopes to change theirs. I think that's it, right, Rose?
Right. And don't forget if you want a copy of the home learning audit, you can get that using the QR code and use that as a way to chat about what matters in learning in your home.
Awesome. It's great. I appreciate everyone coming. We'll do more webinars. Open house tomorrow night at 4 p.m. Um, come through. Follow us on Instagram. My goal is to have 1,000 followers by the first day of school. So that's on Wednesday. So all I need are about 750 more, and then we'll hit that goal. So just let your friends and family know tonight at Trader Joe's. If there's someone behind you in line, whether it be the self checkout or otherwise, share our Instagram with them, please, and thank you.